What is up, guys? Welcome back to another UFC prediction video. This week we got UFC Fight Night, Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov taking place in Saudi Arabia. Great co-main event as well, MVP versus Shara Bullet. Without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get right into the full card predictions. Alright, our first fight on the card, we got Jamal Pogues versus Hamdy Abdul Wahib. Interesting name to try to pronounce. I'm going to be taking Jamal Pogues here to win a decision. I think he's just the much better fighter pretty much everywhere the fight goes. Hamdy, I think he has a wrestling background, but Jamal Pogues, he's a pretty good MMA grappler. He took on Thomas Peterson, got a win there. Thomas Peterson's pretty decent at grappling. He has a wrestling background as well. And Jamal Pogues, I think, is going to be the much better striker. Trains out of Syndicate MMA, so that's a really good gym. He's got good light heavyweight and heavyweight training partners there to improve, and I think he's just more athletic, has better cardio. And look, Hamdy, his only fight in the UFC, he went to a split decision with Dontel Mays, so not impressive whatsoever. Give me Jamal Pogues to win this by decision. I think he's just the better fighter, and yeah, he's getting it done. Our next fight on the card, we have Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. This is going to be a pretty good fight. Lucas Alexander, you know, he has pretty good grappling, decent jiu-jitsu, has some clean hands as well, but he's a fighter that's never really been able to put it together in the UFC. You know, he's 1-2 in the UFC. That win being Steven Peterson, who is just terrible. Like, that's just the bottom of the barrel type of caliber fighter in the UFC. Worst possible win you get in the UFC. And other than that, you know, got knocked out versus Jeka Sagari. I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but yeah, got knocked out by that guy. Doesn't have great fight IQ. Also got submitted by the one and only Joe Anderson Brito. Taking on Bogdan Grad, making his UFC debut here in this spot, coming off the Contender Series. In his Contender Series fight, fought Michael Aswell, who's a really good fighter in his own right. Really good boxer, slick, good fighter. And they had a very closely contested, competitive fight, and it was also wildly entertaining. Both of those guys left it all in the octagon, really gave it their all, and that's the big difference between these two, in my opinion. Bogdan Grad, yeah, he might not be the most technically sound fighter, does have a pretty good grappling base, you know, has had some success with the grappling on the regional scene. And like I said, not the most technical fighter, needs to work on his head movement and his defense. He does get touched a lot, but, you know, in his last fight, got touched a lot, but that was against a really good boxer in Michael Aswell. But in that fight, they were kind of the same stature. In this fight here, Lucas Alexander is going to have a slight height and reach advantage, but Bogdan Grad, he's one of these fighters that's super tenacious, never gives up on himself, and he's always going to push forward, and he's always going to have grit, like a Dricus du Plessis or a Yuri Prochazka, for example. Maybe not the most technically sound, but they're always going to go out there and give it their all, and that's the most important thing in all of MMA. So I'm going to be taking Bogdan Grad here to win by unanimous decision, 30-27. I think that Lucas Alexander, you know, I think he just is kind of flaky, checks out of fights, makes low fight IQ decisions. And look, I think that Bogdan Grad, he has a really good grappling base. Like I said, I don't see him getting subbed here. If Lucas Alexander does go for the grappling route, I think they're going to kind of cancel out. I think it'll end up kind of being a striking battle for 3 rounds, and I favor Bogdan Grad coming off of a very similar fight to that style, you know, a 3-round fight on the feet, which I kind of see this fight taking place in that realm. And I'll take him here to close the distance, get in on the inside without taking too much damage, laying good shots of his own. He has good kicks, he's explosive, and like I said, never gives up on himself. He's an absolute dog in there, and he's really aggressive as well. You look back at some of his regional fights, he's a guy that is explosive, you know, just always pushing the action, and he likes to break his opponents. And also looks really good on the judges' scorecards. You know, you think about a guy like Sean Strickland, not a lot of activity. Yeah, it can be effective, but just it doesn't look good for the judges. And Bogdan Grad, he has a style that looks really good to the judges. Lots of activity, lots of forward movement. I think he gets the job done here 30-27 using those attributes over Lucas Alexander, who, like I said, is just kind of flaky, seems to throw fights a lot of the times, kind of has like the Kevin Holland syndrome, and, you know, the one win over Steven Peterson, not impressed. Lucas Alexander, you know, he's technically sound. He's a guy that, you know, he'll look good on the pads, and, you know, sometimes when you're watching tape on him, he can be impressive, but you just can't count on him to win at the end of the day. And you can count on Bogdan Grad to go out there, work hard, and get the W. I think he does that this weekend. Give me Bogdan Grad 30-27 decision. Pretty confident in that one there, and I have a decent amount of money on Bogdan Grad as well. Our next fight on the card, we have Terrence McKinney taking on Damir Hadzovic. Now, thankfully, Terrence isn't facing somebody with devastating striking because he's been KO'd so many times. It's really brutal. I mean, you think about the Sean Woodson TKO on the Contender Series. You think about the Drew Dober, just flatline KO. You look at the Gabriel Bonfim flying knee. And then, of course, last time out, Esteban Ribovic head kicking him out of the arena. Pretty brutal stuff for poor Terrence McKinney. You know, he had that really good win over Matt Frivola, quick KO in his debut, and he's just a guy that it's either a quick finish for him or it's a quick finish for his opponents. And normally when he's getting finished, he's getting absolutely brutalized. You know, he did get subbed by Nazim Sadikov, but, you know, he's a good fighter overall. Just he has durability issues and, you know, just in terms of getting finished, even by sub. But, you know, his natural ability is definitely there. He's a well-rounded fighter, and we've seen him do good in the past. Damir Hadzovic, you know, he's a guy that's getting older, doesn't really have many notable wins in the UFC. He's always been a prelim guy, and, you know, last time out, lost to Mark DeCasey. That was 3 years ago almost at this point. That was in 2022. I think the inactivity is going to definitely hurt him here. I expect him to be slow, ring rusted, and I think Terrence McKinney, this is kind of a layup for him. More athletic, pretty well rounded. I don't see him getting chinned or finished here, so I think he can go out there and get a second round TKO. Just kind of put the hands on him, be quicker, and yeah, just use his athletic advantages to win this fight realistically, because neither of these guys are really overly impressive anywhere, but I think that Terrence McKinney, he does have some X factors with the hand speed and just the natural ability overall. Give me Terrence McKinney by round 2 TKO. Our next fight on the card, we have Shamil the Blob Gaziev taking on Thomas Peterson. I'm going to be taking Thomas Peterson to win this by round 3 TKO due to cardiac arrest. Dude, Shamil, look, he's a meme. We all love him. He's hilarious, but let's just be real. He's absolutely dog shit, overweight, and just an absolute pathetic excuse of a ranked heavyweight. Really goes to show the state of the heavyweight division. Look, he's just a fucking fat blob, man. He has no skill. You know, he kind of overwhelmed Martin Buday in his debut, and on the Contender Series didn't look horrible. His Contender Series performance was actually decent, but, you know, let's just be fair to him. He's all right, but nonetheless, every single time he goes out there, he looks like he's about to go into cardiac arrest if it leaves the first. And we saw that in the famous Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight where he was about to puke. He was spitting out his mouthpiece. And, you know, last time out, got a win over Don'Tale Mayes, who literally didn't do anything in that fight. And Shamil was getting actual takedowns against Don'Tale Mayes simply by, they would just trip over each other, and Shamil would just, like a fucking walrus rolling down a hill, would just happen to land on top of him. Yeah, he's a fat fucking pig. Give me Thomas Peterson, who is the size of a lightweight, who's just also fat. He's out of shape as well. He needs to hit the treadmill with a sauna suit on, but does actually have some level of skill, you know, decent boxing. He actually does have a wrestling background as well, and I trust him to just be able to get a takedown and just kind of hold Shamil on his back, because Shamil is like a turtle. You flip him over, he ain't getting back up. He's just gonna fucking sit there for the rest of the round. No athletic ability whatsoever. Thomas Peterson, you know, small frame for the heavyweight division for sure. Like I said, he's just an out of shape lightweight basically. But you look on the Contender Series fight I think it'll kind of go similar in this one. Just able to topple the big fat guy over. Has decent takedown entries, a lot faster and cleaner than the walrus tumbling down the hill takedowns that Shamil the Blob Gaziev goes for. I'll take Thomas Peterson to, take him down in the first, just hold him there, beat him up a little bit of ground and pound. Second round, maybe he has to catch his breath a little bit. They go tit for tat on the feet. Thomas Peterson will 100% be able to land more volume on the feet just because he weighs about 70 pounds less. And I think he'll be able to go out there in the third round, just commit to one more single leg, topple Shamil the Blob Gaziev over because, dude, you pick up one of these heavyweights, you snatch a single leg on them, there's no way these unathletic motherfuckers are going to be able to bounce on one leg and be able to balance or anything along these lines. You just grab that single leg, topple him over, and you basically win the fight. And I think Thomas Peterson's going to be able to do that in the third round and then just ground and pound TKO him. In the Battle of the Blobs, give me Thomas Peterson. He's just less fat and a little bit better in terms of his wrestling entries and a little bit slicker on the feet. So, unfortunately, I think our boy Shamil the Blob Gaziev is going to lose. Our next fight on the card, we have Muhammad Naimov versus Khan Ofli. I'm going to take Muhammad Naimov to get this one done by a second round TKO. I think that he's going to be the bigger fighter in there. Even though last time out, I know he was fighting a natural bantamweight in Felipe Lima, Muhammad Naimov is actually a pretty big featherweight, has a good amount of muscle mass, and he's really well-rounded, just a good overall fighter, pretty solid round kicks to the body, good straight shots on the feet, and he does have solid grappling. He is from Tajikistan. He's going to have the hometown advantage basically here. He normally does fight on these Saudi Arabia cards, and last time out, like I said, lost to Felipe Lima, but Felipe Lima is a much higher level fighter than Khan Ofli. Khan Ofli, only one UFC fight, did get TKO'd versus Marian Santos, and Santos is actually a good fighter, but I think he's just a little bit more green and raw than a Muhammad Naimov, who does have a good amount of high-level experience. You look back at the win over Nathaniel Wood, albeit controversial, did get the job done, fought on the Mexico Fight Night card. Forgot who he was fighting, but did get a round 1 TKO there. Looked solid, and he's just a guy you can rely on to go out there and get the job done. I think Muhammad Naimov makes it look pretty easy here. Khan Ofli, he's been training with the boys down at CKB, Izzy, Robert Whitaker, Alexander Volkanovski. They're all down there in camp training together. Carlos Olberg, Kevin Jusset in the background and all that. Khan Ofli's out there training with those guys. Probably looking to clean up the striking a little bit because I do believe he's more of a jiu-jitsu guy, tries to go for the submissions. And yeah, I think that, we saw his abilities of his submissions in the Ultimate Fighter, but it's just not the same caliber of fighter as a Muhammad Naimov. I think Muhammad Naimov's going to have learned from last time, not give up his back. And that was also like a Hail Mary from Felipe Lima as well. Naimov was about to be able to win that third round to get the job done there. And Felipe Lima, he was fighting with all the passion in the world, fighting for his mom, UFC debut. Khan Ofli, I think he knows he's not at this level, and I don't see him getting the job done here, especially not in Saudi Arabia. He's going to have to get the finish, and I can't count on Muhammad Naimov getting choked out twice. So, yeah, give me Muhammad Naimov, round 2 TKO. I think Khan Ofli just really isn't that great on the feet, and I think Muhammad Naimov gets him out of there, stuffs the takedowns, and yeah, is just gonna be able to piece him up on the feet, especially in Saudi Arabia. He's got to get sub to lose. Simple pick here, Muhammad Naimov gets the job done. Our next fight on the card, we have Firas Ziam versus Mike Davis. Interesting fight here. Mike Davis, predominantly a grappler, does like to go in with the big takedowns, likes to use his explosive ability, his athleticism, and he is also improving on the feet. Pretty well-rounded guy. In his last few fights, he's gotten the job done. Last time out versus Natan Levy, pretty dominant display of ground and pound there, really faced no adversity. And in the fight before that, did face some adversity against Vyacheslav Borshev, Slava Claus. Pretty close fight there, but Mike Davis was able to use his grappling advantageously in that fight and was able to get the decision there. And Borishev is a very, very good striker. And Mike Davis, he landed a good amount of shots on Vyacheslav Borishev there. I remember him landing a good uppercut right hand over the top, and I do think his striking is coming along. On the other side, Faraz Ziam, career best performance last time out versus Matt Frivola in France, got the beautiful knee in the clinch finish. And, he's been doing all right, wins over Claudio Puelles. And yeah, he's been slowly improving. And he's one of these guys that are really lanky for the division. He's a range striker for sure. Teeps up the middle jabs definitely are his strong suits. But his defensive grappling has been improving. So it's hard to pick against Faraz Ziam considering all of the improvements we've been seeing from him in his grappling defense, because Mike Davis just really isn't that dominant. I mean, look back at the Borishev fight. Borishev has improved since that fight in his defensive grappling, but at that point it really wasn't good. And Mike Davis, there were times in that fight where he was literally dry heaving almost in the octagon because of how tired he was. And he really wasn't chain wrestling. He was only shooting 2 or 3 takedowns in those rounds and still really gassed out. Got hit with a couple good liver shots from Borishev, don't get me wrong, but the cardio was concerning. And unless he's able to get a finish, a TKO on the ground over Faraz Ziam, I could definitely see him struggling over the course of 3, because I think his cardio is definitely an issue. Only loss in the UFC coming by sub against Gilbert Burns. So he's really been putting it all together since that loss. But, he's going to be at a striking disadvantage like he was in the Borishev fight. He's going to have to rely on the takedowns. And you're really just going to have to see whether or not his cardio holds up. That's what this fight comes down to, is Mike Davis's cardio. If he gets tired, he will lose. If he doesn't, he will win. So it's difficult, but I'm going to lean on the side of Mike Davis. I think that, dude, but it's in Saudi Arabia, so they're probably not going to give him the decision, considering Ziam is the demographic of fighter they're trying to push. But I'm not going to lean into that too much. I'm going to pick the fighter that I think is going to win. Give me Mike Davis to win this fight via decision. Very tight, 29-28 split decision. I think it's going to be one of the rare times we see the American win over there in Saudi Arabia, but Ziam, he's French. It's not like he's from the Middle East, so you got a little bit of a cushion there in terms of the judges' scorecard. So give me Mike Davis. If he gets tired, he will lose, so be on the lookout for that. But I think that he's just going to be able to overpower Faraz Ziam, who, make no mistake, did look good in the Matt Frivola fight, but Matt Frivola looked kind of clunky and uncoordinated in that fight. And he also doesn't have as good of wrestling as Mike Davis. I think Mike Davis knows he's going to have to go in there and get the fight to the mat. I trust him to do so. Give him to me via split decision. All right, our next fight on the card, we got Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Lockdog Olivera. This will definitely be a pretty entertaining fight. I'm going to take Said Nurmagomedov to get this one done, and I'm going to pick him to win by decision. Vinicius Olivera is good, don't get me wrong, but he's actually overrated in people's eyes now because he's kind of like the hardcore pick almost, because he's only had 2 UFC fights, had the really impressive KO of the year contender flying knee versus Bernardo Sopage, but make no mistake, he was losing that fight. Got a nice left hook TKO on the contender series, and last time out did very well in a win versus Ricky Simon. Said Nurmagomedov, you think back to the Jonathan Martinez loss, the Ronnie Barcelos loss, those definitely don't look good on paper going into this matchup, but Said Nurmagomedov, he's the much cleaner striker. Vinicius Olivera really just slings from the hips in terms of his punching. He has good round kicks to the body, but, in terms of his boxing, doesn't really put things together too cleanly, really just swings for the fences. He's aggressive, which does help him a lot of the times, but moves forward, chin on a silver platter, head up in the air, just swinging for the fences. He's super, defensively irresponsible, frankly. And like I said, he has good round kicks, but the grappling is lacking. I mean, Ricky Simon just didn't do shit against him, but Ricky Simon just isn't that great. I think Said Nurmagomedov would probably finish Ricky Simone, frankly. And yeah, give me Said Nurmagomedov. I think that he can also implement the takedowns similarly to Bernardo Sopaj to, save him the round if he, happens to, start losing that round. It starts slipping out of his grasp. He can shoot a takedown and secure it. Vinicius Oliveira also has to get either multiple 10-8 rounds or a KO to be able to win this fight. It's a Nurmagomedov in Saudi Arabia. You already know what's going to happen if it goes to the scorecards. Needless to say, Said will win even if he loses. The Middle Eastern judging, even though it's literally like some of the same exact judges as, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Saudi Amato and shit like that. That motherfucker is corrupt. Literally investigate Saudi Amato. Every robbery I've ever fucking seen, he's been on the wrong side of it. But, other than the fact that we need to investigate Saudi Amato, FBI investigation, bug his house, tap his phones, he's selling fucking fights. I'm telling you that dude's corrupt. But besides the point, I think Said Nurmagomedov, he's much more technical on the feet, really good kicking arsenal. In round one, he's, one of the best fighters you ever fucking see. But he does have cardio issues. Make no mistake, he does slow down as the fight goes on. I think that's why, the optics weren't good for him in that Jonathan Martinez fight, which is why the judges gave it to Martinez. But I think Said definitely did the more effective work in that fight. Really good switch kicks, really good high kicks, front kicks up the body. He puts together combinations nicely. Soviet boxing style, really slick, kind of has that, that Russian bounce in his footwork. And like I said, he can go to the takedowns if he needs to. He's well-rounded. And yeah, I got him getting the job done here by decision. Like I said, it's got to be a KO for Olivera if he wants to get the nod via the judges. So I'm going with Said to get it done by decision. Yeah, I think that Vinicius Oliveira, he has winnable matchups in the division for sure, but I don't think he's a top 15 guy in this division. Not yet, at least. And I do think that Said Nurmagomedov is a top 15 caliber fighter in this division. I mean, he's had some good wins. If you take out that Jonathan Martinez robbery, he would be on a pretty good win streak right now. 5 or 6 fight win streak. Wins over Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann, man, people forget, man. Nah, but, that's a decent win on paper. He also beat Murin Gafarov, who, that fight made Murin look bad, but he's actually starting to come back and put it all together now. Murin Gafarov, I fucking knew I should have picked him to beat Rinya Nakamura, because I was like, he really seems to be kind of putting it together with the hands in his last fight. But besides the fact, Murin Gafarov, a win for Said Nurmagomedov that's actually aging well. That was his last fight, which was on the Volk Islam 2 card, which has definitely been a good amount of time. He's been inactive, but, he had an opponent pull out at UFC 308. Who was he going to fight? Who was he going to fight on UFC 308? Daniel Marcos? Or Daniel Santos? No, he was supposed to fight Daniel Santos at UFC 308. And he was supposed to fight Daniel Marcos as well. But both of those fights got canceled. So, yeah, now here he is versus Vinicius Oliveira. I think he gets the job done by decision. Give me Said Nurmagomedov to get it done. All right, our heavyweight featured fight of the evening. We got Sergey Pavlovich versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Bigi Boy. This is going to be a good fight right here. You'd think that it would most likely end in a first round knockout, but I have this weird gut feeling that Jairzinho Rozenstruik is going to be on the back foot, inside leg kick, jab, head movement, and just kind of stay out of the way of things for the first 5 minutes and maybe lose the round. Maybe he takes a shot or two, takes a couple jabs to the nose, loses the round. But I think that Jairzinho, he's going to prioritize staying safe in this matchup. And if he survives the first 5 minutes, we're looking at a completely different fight. Sergey Pavlovich, he was on that crazy run before he fought Tom Aspinall at UFC 295. 6 fight win streak, all coming by way of knockout in the first round. I mean, that dude, going into that UFC 295 fight, Pavlovich had hella aura. He was like the Ivan Drago of the UFC. But look, he's a good fighter, but he really just doesn't stain people out cold instantaneously like a lot of guys do. Make no mistake, he's scary, but I feel like his look and his name and just the aura surrounding him makes him seem more dangerous than he is. You know, his best win is over Curtis Blades, where that was his best performance in my opinion. Looked really good in that fight. But, you know, Curtis Blades, he's always been a little bit wishy-washy when he fights power punchers, so that was always going to be a hard fight for him. And other than that, you're looking at a Derek Lewis and a Tai Tuivasa win. Derek Lewis, kind of like the heavyweight Kevin Holland, throws fights a lot of the times. And Tai Tuivasa, yeah, that win is aging poorly to say the very least. Even though considering Jairzinho Rozenstruik's last win was over Tai Tuivasa, look, I think that, you know, we're underrating Jairzinho's chances in this fight because, you know, Sergey Pavlovich is a minus 300 favorite, which I think that line is quite out of this world. You know, he should win the fight. You know, he's got the crazy reach advantage, you know, Russian fucking marauder, and he's kind of due for a bounce back. You know, he lost to Volkov and just got outclassed in that matchup. Wasn't really throwing anything. Really looked poor in that matchup, and if that gets to his head, I could definitely see it affecting his performance here, and maybe Bigi Boy scrapes by a decision. Because I don't see Jairzinho staining Sergey Pavlovich. Pavlovich does have a good chin. Tom Aspinall can knock out anybody with the right shot, especially that quick 1-2 that you don't see over your lead shoulder. But Jairzinho, you know, he's starting to bounce back in his own right. You know, win over Shamil the Blob Gaziev, win over Tai Tuivasa. Blobulous opponents, fat opponents that aren't on the level of a Sergey Pavlovich. But, you know, I guess those are decent opponents to prepare for a step up in competition like this. And Rozenstruik, you know, he's always been a good striker, good kickboxer. You know, you think back to that gnarly TKO over Alistair Overeem. Alistair Overeem as well did beat Sergey Pavlovich in his UFC debut. Sergey Pavlovich only ever losing to Alistair Overeem, Tom Aspinall, and Alexander Volkov. So you're looking at three guys that, you know, frankly, have always been in the top five. You know, when Alistair was in his prime, he was normally always in the top five. And Volkov and Tom Aspinall, I mean, they're staples in the top five at this point. So he's only ever lost to high-level competition. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he's only ever lost to decent competition as well. I mean, you know, the Curtis Blades loss, the Alexander Volkov by TKO loss, which really is the most concerning look going into this fight. You know, Volkov stained him with a clean right hand on the chin. And, of course, Francis Ngannou just absolutely blitzkrieged him in the first round of that UFC 249, I believe it was, Justin versus Tony. Got subbed by Jilton Almeida and lost to Surreal Gone. So, yeah, he's only ever lost to just the absolute cream of the crop as well. So, I don't think that Bigi Boy should be a plus 275 dog here in this spot. I think the value is definitely on Bigi Boy from a betting perspective. It's hard not to just pick Pavlovich by round 1 KO just from a pure picks standpoint. But I'm actually going to take Bigi Boy to win a decision here. I've just had a gut feeling about it ever since I saw this matchup announced. I think that, like I said, first round, just play it safe, jab, inside low kick, use some head movement. He's decently slick with the head movement. And I think he can avoid the early storm of Pavlovich as long as he just doesn't get clipped by that long lead uppercut, because he is going to be shorter, massive reach disadvantage. That long uppercut from Pavlovich is going to be there. But I'm going to take Bigi Boy to weather the storm in the first 5 and then just outstrike him for the last 2. Similarly to Volkov, obviously he's not the stature of an Alexander Volkov, but I think he can be in and out, lots of leg kicks, maybe try and cut away the mobility of Sergey. And once he cuts down that mobility, Sergey's going to be a little bit more plotty. I think that the longer this fight goes on, the easier it's going to get for Jairzinho. So I think he's going to start landing decent combinations at the end of it. I think his confidence is going to be a lot higher going into this fight than Sergey's is at this point as well. And if they really do just clash in the center of the octagon and start slugging, I don't hate his chances. I mean, obviously you gotta side with Pavlovich if they just start slugging. But, you know, Bigi Boy's had his decent KOs as well. You know, a quicker, lighter Chris Dawkins, you know, that's a good TKO. And, you know, he's had good performances. And I'm going to trust Bigi Boy to get it done here. I think he can beat Pavlovich. I think Pavlovich's momentum is just really going to hurt him here. Give me Bigi Boy to win by decision. And, you know, the KO is always possible, but I'm actually going to side with him winning on points here. Our next fight on the card, we have Shara, the one-eyed freak, Bullet Magomedov, versus MVP. Interesting fight to call. But if there was ever going to be judges' bias in a fight on this card, you know, I've talked about Naimov. I've talked about maybe they'll lean on the side of Ziam. I've talked about Saeed Nurmagomedov, of course. He ain't going to lose on the scorecards. You know how they are about the Nurmagomedovs. Shara Magomedov is, you know, Turkey al-Sheikh and all those Saudi Arabia guys, you know, shiny toy that they always put on the card. So I think there's a really realistic possibility MVP beats the shit out of him and they give Shara Magomedov the fight on points. Because Shara, I can't really see him just getting flatlined clean by one of MVP's counter blitz right hands. Because look, MVP, he's a good striker for sure, but I think he's actually starting to get overrated right now because he had a great performance in his UFC debut against Kevin Holland, for sure. But that's Kevin Holland, who's just the biggest dumbass retard idiot in the sport, who actually should be cut and sent to the GFL. Fuck Kevin Holland. He's actually a disgrace to the sport. Can't stand him. His existence pisses me off. But yeah, MVP was able to beat him. I picked MVP in that fight to win by decision. And look, he looked good in that fight. You know, was landing a couple kicks, some spinning elbows, the counter right hand. But his striking arsenal actually isn't super deep. You know, he isn't out here landing good fundamentals. You know, he doesn't have a great jab. He doesn't land good combinations. Doesn't really chop too many leg kicks. Not too many round kicks to the body and the head. You know, it's a lot of flash. It's a lot of explosive movements. It's a lot of nothing in between him as well, which is going to hurt him here, especially going to the cards, because MVP, his whole thing is just catching you off guard, which I think he'll definitely be able to do considering Shara has one eye. He's blind in half of his fucking face, so eventually that's going to catch up to him. But I believe it's his right eye that he's missing. Yeah, it's his right eye that he's missing. MVP's right hand is going to be coming on the left side of his face. So he's going to actually have a decent peripheral vision of that. I think we're going to see Shara Magomedov get caught with something, but I think it's going to have to be on the left side to where it's out of that line of sight on his blind eye. But I think my point being is I think he's going to see the right hand coming because it's not on his blind side. And MVP, he really loads up for it, man. I mean, he almost telegraphs it to a certain extent. I mean, it's one of these shots that's hard to prepare for, but he's bouncing, and then he springs in with the right hand. And he just kind of rinses and repeats that unless he's able to just completely outclass somebody like the bum Kevin Holland. I think that Shara Magomedov is going to be a little bit more passive on the feet. You know, he's not going to leave himself super open to just getting countered with the right hand. You know, you look at the Ian Gary fight. Ian Gary was about to shit his pants. And you know, you could also tell that he was actually just thinking about timing the takedown. I don't think he was even too overly concerned about the striking, really. And I think Shara Magomedov, he can maybe pull some grappling out of his back pocket. We've never seen that in his career, so you can't bank on it. But I'm going to pick Shara Magomedov to get the job done by decision. You know, he opened as an underdog, quickly moved to being the favorite, and now he's almost a minus 200 favorite. So I actually got him at dog odds. I think that in this fight, the value may be on whoever is the underdog, but you actually have to be banking on Page to get the KO, like I said, because they will not let him win a decision here, not against the golden boy of the oil money families. Being Shara Bullet Magomedov, the one-eyed freak, he's going to have the volume advantage. He lands a lot of significant strikes every single round of his fights. He peppers with the kicks. He has solid counters with his hands, Soviet boxing style, and it's a lot of activity. And even if he takes a couple shots in between, I think his leg kicks, teep kicks, his kicking arsenal is just very good. Very good. We know how he fights at this point. And I think that his kicking arsenal is just going to put him up on significant strikes, and you just will not be able to give MVP the rounds unless he just drops him with a mean right hand and Shara just starts stumbling around everywhere. I think Shara is just going to be able to kick him in the legs. MVP has a very wide stance. That leg kick's going to be open for Shara. And I think that Shara Magomedov is also improving on a fight-to-fight basis. You look at his Mikhail Olasejchik performance versus his Arman Petrosian performance. He did very, very well, improving on, where he needed to in terms of his hands, especially going into that Arman Petrosian fight. And he showed an improvement on a fight-to-fight basis. I think he'll be able to maybe improve another level here going into this fight. Big co-main event spot. And, I just don't think he gets KO'd. And the volume, all the significant strikes, the numbers, the statistics are definitely going to be in Shara's favor. MVP doesn't have a good volume game whatsoever. He's a shot finder. He doesn't put out a lot of volume, which doesn't look good to the judges, especially when you already are going against the bias that they're going to have for him with it being here in Saudi Arabia. So give me Shara Bullet, the one-eyed fucking freak of nature, to get this job done. I'd actually rather MVP win because I'm more of a fan of MVP, but I actually think that Shara Magomedov is a relatively safe pick on this card. To be honest, I do think he gets the job done here. Like I said, he may pull out some grappling from his back pocket, but unless he gets right-handed or flying kneed out cold, I don't see him losing this fight. And, you look at MVP's losses in the past. Yeah, most of them have come by the grappling, Logan Storley and all that. But don't forget about that Douglas Lima KO where he got leg kicked and uppercutted and absolutely stained. MVP does do a lot of goofy shit in the octagon, which can get him caught. Shara Bullet Magomedov, you saw the insane, beautiful double spinning back fist TKO he got in his last fight. And, maybe MVP gets leg kicked and then head kicked because he fucking trips. I could see MVP doing some dumb shit to get caught is what I'm saying. And Shara Bullet, he's got good elbows, good knees. Maybe MVP closes the distance a little too quickly, gets caught with one of those. So we'll see. Looking forward to this fight, but I actually think Shara Bullet Magomedov is going to get this done rather comfortably. Everybody's picking MVP, but give me Shara Bullet. All right, we got Izzy versus Imavov. Two fighters that I'm actually a really big fan of. I like both of these guys a lot. I know there's a lot of hate coming to Israel Adesanya nowadays. He's definitely just stupid in a lot of regards outside of the octagon. But when he's inside of the octagon, you can't hate on him. He's a great fighter. And in his last two fights, of course, he has lost. It's kind of seemed like his time might be coming to a close. We will see. This is definitely the matchup that really is going to show where Izzy's at in his career at this point. I think there's a high likelihood that if he doesn't get the job done, that might be all we see from Izzy in his UFC career. I do think there's a real possibility he retires if he doesn't win, only because I know the level Izzy holds himself to. He's not going to fight on any lower stage than a main event, than a pay-per-view. It's just not going to happen. That's not who Izzy is. He's the top of the bill every single time. The main event, the main story. He's never going to be anything else other than that. He will retire before that. Imavov, on the other hand, he's slowly been working his way up, and he had a big year last year, a huge year. One of the most improved fighters in terms of his, view from the ranking standpoints. Going into last year at this time, he was fighting Roman Dolidze and got the job done there, handled that with ease. I picked him there to win by decision. Imavov as well has been a guy that has put some money in my pocket. I respect him. I've bet on him in his last 3 fights, and he's gotten the job done every single time. Beating Roman Dolidze by decision. Beating Jared Cannonier by TKO, which I was live in attendance for. That was a decent performance from him. The next fight after that, fought Brendan Allen in Paris. Not the best performance, but got the job done nonetheless in his hometown, riding some momentum into this matchup, unlike Izzy, who is on a 2-fight skid. So this one's hard to call. Stylistically, Izzy, he's got a 5-inch reach advantage. Both of these guys like to operate from range in terms of the kickboxing. I think you definitely have to give Izzy the striking edge just in terms of the pure kickboxing. Imavov, he kind of has a Soviet style of boxing. Reminds me of Bivol, kind of how he's always in and out. He's got that kind of looping check hook and lots of straight shots. Pretty good striker overall, mixes in kicks decently. And yeah, he's just solid with the teep kicks especially. Can mix in the grappling. In terms of his grappling though, what you're going to see from Imavov 90% of the time is going to be a duck under back take. You think about John Jones versus Surreal Gone, that exact type of takedown. Opponent throws a punch, Imavov ducks under, swivels to the back, he's got the body lock, and he'll take you down from there. We saw that against Joaquin Buckley. We saw that in the fight versus Roman Dolidze. We saw it once, I believe, against Jared Cannonier, and I think in the 3rd round he got it against Brendan Allen. Look, he's a well-rounded fighter, and he's decent, but this is a huge step up in competition because, look, Brendan Allen is just a completely different stylistic matchup, so you can't really even take that into consideration. Let's look at the Jared Cannonier fight, where Jared Cannonier definitely looked older, more sluggish in that fight, whereas Izzy, even though he hasn't gotten the result in the last 2, the performances were actually pretty underrated. Look, in the Sean Strickland fight, I know that he got shut down, but despite losing, despite getting dropped, despite, really just getting nullified in terms of your offense and getting walked down, he threw a lot of significant strikes in that fight. Like, normally in his title reign, you think back to when he fought Cannonier, when he fought Marvin Vettori, you're not seeing a lot of output. You're not seeing a lot of numbers on the board from Israel Adesanya. Go back and rewatch that Sean Strickland fight. Izzy almost never stopped throwing. Was he landing? No, because Sean Strickland had excellent defense. But make no mistake, he was throwing the kitchen sink at Sean Strickland. Like, it looked like Izzy was going out there hitting the bag, just putting combinations together, but nothing was landing because Sean was just dialed that night in terms of his defense. And you look at the Dricus du Plessis fight, had an excellent performance there. One thing I will definitely criticize though about the performance against Dricus du Plessis was the fact that Izzy has won many important fights of his with really excellent counter striking, committed counter striking, planting his feet and letting go a nasty left hook, planting his feet and letting go a nasty right hand. There was none of that against Dricus du Plessis. And I picked Israel Adesanya there confidently, had 3 units on him to win that fight. And that's really where I thought he was going to have success, because Dricus, he's a guy that comes in, defensively irresponsible, blitzing forward like an idiot. And Izzy, I've seen it in the past. Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, the 2 times that he dropped Kelvin Gastelum, how he wobbled Alex Pereira in the first fight, how he finished Alex Pereira in the second fight. These type of counter shots where he's fully committed to him, fucking in an athletic stance, feet planted on the ground. I know he was concerned about the takedown, but regardless, that wasn't really even a threat until halfway through the second round. Didn't throw a lot of leg kicks in that fight. I think he may have broken his foot. I'm not sure. His footwork has been concerning in his last 2. He has been facing Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, who are different than his previous stylistic matchups, where he didn't have to respond to pressure as much. Pressure is really how you beat Adesanya, and we saw that in his last 2 fights. Imavov's not a guy that pressures, and that's going to help Izzy a lot, especially considering the 5-inch reach advantage. These guys like to operate off of straight shots, teep kicks, the occasional round kick. They actually have kind of similar skill sets when you think about it, but Izzy is just higher quality when it comes to every single one of those attributes. He's got a better jab, he's got a better teep, he's better at range, He just is. He's levels above when it comes to that. Imavov does have decent hand speed. You think back to his, counter right hand that he got Jared Cannonier with. I specifically called that he would get that counter right hand if he did get the TKO in that fight there. And that is a good tool from him. Both of these guys, I've bet on their fights a lot. I've done a lot of tape study on them. So I feel like I do have a pretty good read on both of these guys. And I think that Imavov's really going to have to lean on the grappling. And he's got that duck under back takedown, which he's pretty good at. But something that's definitely going to be a disadvantage for him here is the fact that this is 5 rounds. If this was 3 rounds, I'd actually, have this like 50-50. Because 3 rounds would significantly favor Imavov because he does not have the greatest cardio. It's not something that he struggles with, but it's not great. I remember I had money on him in that Jared Cannonier fight. I was there live watching him. And I could tell the body language wasn't great going into that, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. He was a little bit winded, but at the end of that 3rd round, he let off a nice combination, got a high kick, and that kind of gave him a second wind. And of course, he was able to get the stoppage in the 4th against Jared. And then in the Roman Dolidze fight as well, his 2 worst rounds were 100% the 4th and the 5th. Pretty sure he lost the 4th round getting held up against the fence, even though I believe that's the round he got a point deducted for an eye poke or a headbutt. He got a point deducted in that fight. I can't remember why, but as fights progress, he does a lot worse. And this is a huge step up in competition. Izzy, he's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt 1,000 times. This is the most chill, non-pressure moment he's had in his career in a long time, which definitely could be a negative thing because Izzy, he's a guy that does fuel himself with that fear, with that anger, with that animosity, like against the Dricus du Plessis or against an Alex Pereira, where you can see, and against Paulo Costa as well, when you can see, chin tucked, he's locked in. You can see there's just a different body language that Israel Adesanya has when he's in these types of matchups where it's emotional. He does kind of thrive off of that because, he's emotional as fuck. He's emotional as hell. There's a lot of things outside the octagon I wish he wouldn't do, but inside the octagon, when all the antics kind of come to fruition, he does do really good under pressure. And I think that could hurt him here, but I also think that could be a bit of a pressure lifted off the shoulders where maybe he's not as afraid of the takedowns. Just subconsciously, maybe he's able to commit a little bit more with his counter striking. I'd like to see that. Imavov, I think maybe he's going to be feeling the heat of the moment a little bit more. This is his big opportunity, big title elimination fight. His whole career has accumulated to this point. I could see it getting to him, especially in terms of, nervous energy. Maybe he expends too much energy in that first round, considering he already has cardio issues. That could definitely be a concern, especially against a guy like Izzy, who's going to be making you work, who's going to be constantly throwing attacks at you. The only time he's ever gone the distance, 5 rounds, was against Roman Dolidze. And Roman Dolidze, the pace that motherfucker fights at. The pace of a snail. Izzy, I think the significant strikes are 100% going to be in his favor. I think he's just the more calculated, better overall striker range. Imavov's going to have to close the distance, get the wrestling going. That's not what he's normally used to. Normally, he does just like to kickbox on the outside. He's going to use more energy having to go for that game plan. I don't think he's going to be fighting to his strengths. And I think Israel Adesanya is. I think this fight's really going to play out slow, on the feet, at range. And you kind of can't pick against Izzy in that spot here. Jared Cannonier landing plenty of clean right hands, plenty of jabs to the nose, plenty of leg kicks. When you're seeing Jared Cannonier land straight shots, leg kicks on you pretty consistently and taking multiple rounds off you, you got to think that Izzy's going to be chopping that leg, landing way more volume and accuracy in terms of the straight shots. And look, I like Imavov. Like I said, he's made me money. He's a fighter that I enjoy watching. And Izzy, he's lost me money. I've bet on him in the Sean Strickland and the Dricus du Plessis matchups. So you'd kind of think that I'd be leaning towards Imavov, but like I said, I've done a fuck ton of tape study on these guys throughout their years of fighting, and I think that I have a pretty good read on it. Imavov is very durable though, and I do think he's also going to step up to the occasion and not get finished, even if he does get tired. Give me Israel Adesanya to win this fight by decision, 49-46, losing the second round due to the grappling, and then using his championship experience to take the last 3. Like I said, I'm looking forward to this fight. If Izzy loses this though, like I said, I actually do think it's curtains. Not that there's not winnable fights for him. He for sure can beat most of the division, but if it's not for the biggest stakes, if it's not, for something, I don't think Izzy is going to continue to fight. So this is big for him, and I also think that just the competitor Izzy is, I think he's just fighting for a win at this point. Sometimes just doing something for yourself rather than doing it to get back at somebody else, kind of like how he was against Alex Pereira. Sometimes that can help you, and I think that Izzy... Dude, but I saw this motherfucker on the Instagram blowing a fucking bubble. And that was his fight week picture. And Imavov, he had his guard up. Shara was doing the fucking elbow. MVP was doing the salute. I wish I could be a fly on the wall. I'm sure the media member came up. Hey, Izzy, we're going to get a fight week picture. Do you want to do a pose? You can put your gloves up, whatever you want to do. You can do a kick, whatever you want to do. Hold on, real quick, let me blow a bubble. Like, bro, grow the fuck up, man. Like, Jesus Christ. It just looked so goofy, bro. So, Israel Adesanya may lose because he blew a bubble and looked goofy as fuck in the fight week picture. So, he might just be checked the fuck out. Who knows where Izzy's head is at. This fight purely comes down to where Izzy is mentally. If he's in fucking painted nails and blowing bubbles mode, dude, you're 36 years of age. Regardless, look, I love Izzy as a fighter, but he needs to lock the fuck in if he wants to win this fight. But I'll take him to win by decision here. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, a comment, subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. Enjoy the card this weekend and have a fantastic rest of your day.